The teacher sat
I do
10
not
feet
care who your
away,
father
arms
is.
crossed,
Leave now.
watching a 7-year-old girl pick chicken nuggets off the dirty cafeteria tiles with trembling hands. She didn't know the girl's father was standing in the doorway, or that one phone call was about to bring 100 Hell's Angels to her front steps. Before we unleash the storm, I want to know where you're riding with us from today. Drop your city and state in the comments right now so I can see how far this Brotherhood reaches. If you love stories where justice is served cold and loud, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get into the story. The boots hit linoleum like hammer blows. Every head in St. Jude's Academy cafeteria turned toward the sound. Expensive haircuts, polo shirts, the kind of kids whose parents donated wings to hospitals. They stared at the doorway where Zaid Flynn stood, 6'4" of leather and ink, his Hell's Angels cut stretching across shoulders that had seen too many fights and buried too many brothers. The room went quiet. That unnatural kind of quiet where even the lunch ladies stopped moving. Zaid had come to surprise his daughter. Take her for afternoon ice cream. Maybe let her ride on the back of his Harley down by the levee, where the air smelled like river water and freedom. He'd even left his meeting with the chapter early, ignoring the looks from his brothers who knew what it meant when Zaid Flynn chose his kid over club business. But the moment he stepped into that pristine cafeteria with its gleaming floors and framed achievement certificates, he knew something was wrong. The silence wasn't respect. It was shame. Then he saw her. Zendaya, his 7-year-old daughter, wearing her favorite red t-shirt, the one with the glitter heart that she'd insisted on wearing despite it being too small, was crumpled on the floor like discarded trash. Her lunch tray lay overturned beside her, chicken nuggets scattered, fries ground into the tile, ketchup smeared like blood. She wasn't screaming. That's what killed him. His baby girl had learned not to scream. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, her small hands clasped together like she was praying for invisibility. 10 feet away, standing over her with a smirk that belonged on someone 3 times his age, was a boy Zaid didn't recognize. 12, maybe 13. Expensive sneakers. Designer polo. The kind of kid who'd never been told no in his privileged life. And behind them both, sitting at a lunch table with her arms crossed like she was watching paint dry, Miss Drummond, the teacher, just sitting there, watching a child sob on her floor like it was background noise. Zaid's hands curled into fists, knuckles cracking like kindling catching fire. Every instinct in his body, every violent impulse honed by years in the club, years protecting his brothers, years surviving in a world that didn't forgive weakness, screamed at him to cross that cafeteria and teach that smirking kid what real fear looked like. But he didn't, because Zendaya looked up. Her eyes found his across the cafeteria, brown eyes just like her mother's, the wife he'd buried 3 years ago. And in them, he saw something worse than fear. Resignation. Like she'd expected this. Like she'd learned that this was just how the world worked. That broke something in Zaid that violence couldn't fix. He moved across the cafeteria with deliberate slowness, his boots echoing in the silence. Kids scrambled back. The bully's smirk faltered. Miss Drummond finally looked up, her face going pale as she registered exactly who was walking toward her. Zaid knelt beside his daughter, and his massive, scarred hands that had held wrenches and guns in his wife's hand as she died, gently cupped Zendaya's tear-streaked face. "Hey, baby girl," he whispered, his voice rough as gravel but soft as a lullaby. "Daddy's here," She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his leather vest, and finally let herself cry out loud. Zaid stood slowly, lifting Zendaya with him, cradling her against his chest. Then he turned to look at Miss Drummond. He didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. You let this happen. You sat there and watched my daughter break. And you did nothing. Miss Drummond physically recoiled, her chair scraping backward. The bully tried to speak. She was in my way. Don't. Zaid's voice was so quiet, so controlled, that it was more terrifying than any shout. Don't say another goddamn word. He walked out of that cafeteria carrying his daughter, and behind him, 100 kids sat in absolute silence, learning a lesson that St. Jude's Academy had never taught them. Some men don't need to raise their voice to promise a reckoning. But as Zaid pushed through the school's front doors into the humid New Orleans afternoon, he saw something that made his blood run colder than the look in Miss Drummond's eyes. A black sedan, city plates, idling across the street with its window down just enough for the camera lens to catch him. They'd been waiting for him, which meant someone had known he was coming. And that meant this wasn't about a bully. This was about something much, much worse. Chapter 2. The Untouchables. Zaid didn't knock. The principal's office door slammed open hard enough to rattle the framed diplomas on the wall. Principal Herbert looked up from his mahogany desk, his face cycling through surprise, then irritation, then carefully constructed concern. Mr. Flynn, I wasn't expecting. My daughter was on the floor. Zaid's voice was steady, too steady. Crying while your teacher sat there and watched. Herbert stood slowly, smoothing his tie like he was preparing for a board meeting instead of answering for child abuse. I understand you're upset, but perhaps we should schedule a proper conference. Who's the kid? I'm sorry? The bully. The one standing over my daughter like she was trash. Who is he? Something flickered in Herbert's eyes. Recognition. Maybe fear. He sat back down, folding his hands like a man about to deliver bad news he'd delivered before. That would be Preston Van de Velde. We call him Trip. He's a spirited child. The name hit Zaid like a freight train he should have seen coming. Van de Velde. Every biker in Louisiana knew that name. Councilman Sterling Van de Velde. Old money, older grudges. The kind of man who controlled zoning permits and police budgets with the same casual authority other men used to order coffee. So that's it? Zaid leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. His daddy's got pull, so my kid eats floor. Mr. Flynn. Herbert's voice dropped, became almost gentle, pitying. St. Jude's is a prestigious institution. We pride ourselves on cultural fit. Perhaps Zendaya would be more comfortable at a school where the other children share more common backgrounds. The words were wrapped in silk, but the message was razor wire. Your daughter doesn't belong here, and neither do you. She's clumsy sometimes, Herbert continued, his smile not reaching his eyes. Falls quite often, according to Miss Drummond's reports, and given your lifestyle choices, well, a man in your position shouldn't be making waves, not if he wants to keep his daughter enrolled, you understand? Zaid understood perfectly. This wasn't a conversation, it was a threat. He straightened slowly, every muscle in his body screaming to flip that desk, to teach this bureaucrat what happened when you made a father choose between his pride and his daughter's safety. But Zendaya was waiting outside, and she'd already cried enough today. "We're done here," Zaid said quietly. "I'm glad you see reason." "We're done," Zaid repeated, "because I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of calling the cops on me. But you remember this moment, Herbert. Remember the choice you made today." He walked out before his restraint broke. The humid Louisiana air hit him like a wet towel as he pushed through the school's front entrance. Zendaya sat on his motorcycle, tiny hands gripping the handlebars, pretending to ride. She smiled when she saw him, small, hesitant, already learning to hide her pain. Then Zaid saw it. The same black sedan from earlier, still idling, still watching. But now there were two of them. And in the passenger seat of the nearest one, a man in a suit raised a camera with a telephoto lens and took 3 deliberate shots. Zaid, his bike, his daughter, documenting, building a case. Zaid's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Flynn," the voice was smooth, cultured, dripping with the kind of confidence that came from never losing. "My name is Sterling Vandeveld. I believe you met my son today." Chapter 3. The Warning Shot. The spaghetti was burning. Zaid smelled it first, that acrid tang of tomato sauce scorching against cheap aluminum, and cursed under his breath as he lunged for the stove. Zendaya sat at their small kitchen table, swinging her legs, watching cartoons on his phone because the cable had been cut off last month. She was safe here, their shotgun house in the bywater, peeling paint, sagging porch, but it was theirs. He'd make her favorite meal, tuck her in, and tomorrow he'd figure out how to fight a man who owned half of New Orleans. Tomorrow. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps. Official. The kind of knock that meant badges and trouble. Zaid killed the burner and moved to the door, already knowing what he'd find. 2 NOPD officers stood on his porch, hands resting casual on their belts, close enough to their weapons to make a point. Zaid Flynn, the older one, gray stubble, dead eyes, didn't wait for confirmation. "We need to have a conversation." "About?" "Harassment of city officials. We received a complaint that you threatened Principal Herbert and attempted to intimidate a minor at St. Jude's Academy." Zaid's jaw tightened. That was fast. Less than 3 hours since he'd left the school. "I didn't threaten anyone. That's not what the report says." The younger officer stepped forward, craning his neck to see past Zaid into the house. "We also received an anonymous tip about unsafe storage of firearms on the premises. Given your affiliation, we take those tips seriously." The words hung like a noose. Affiliation, club member, biker trash. "You got a warrant?" "Don't need one if you're cooperative. Unless you'd prefer we come back with Child Protective Services? Make sure your daughter's in a safe environment?" There it was. The real threat. Zaid stepped back, let them in, watched them walk through his house with gloved hands like they were looking for evidence at a crime scene. They found his legally registered Glock in the bedroom safe, found the rifle in his closet, both locked, both clean. Didn't matter. They wrote it all down. After they left, after 20 minutes of veiled threats and careful documentation, Zaid stood in his kitchen watching Zendaya sleep on the couch, still wearing her red shirt with the glitter heart, and felt something he hadn't felt since his wife's funeral. Helplessness. This wasn't a fight he could win with his fists. Van de Velde was dismantling his life with lawyers and paperwork and phone calls to cops who'd do what they were told. Zaid pulled out his phone, found the number for Marcus Chen, a lawyer who'd helped the club before. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Zaid, what's up? I need help. Legal help. There's a situation with my daughter's school and—" "Hold on. What? School?" "St. Jude's Academy." Silence. "Marcus? Who's involved?" Zaid hesitated. "Councilman Van de Velde's son is bullying Zendaya. The principal's protecting him. Now cops are—" The line went dead. Zaid stared at his phone, hit redial. Voicemail. He tried 3 more lawyers. Same result. The moment he said Van de Velde, they found reasons to hang up. The councilman owned them all. Zaid sank onto his couch, Zendaya's small body pressed against his side, and realized with crushing certainty that he was completely alone. The state, the school, the lawyers, all of them belonged to a man who'd already decided Zaid Flynn wasn't fit to raise his own daughter. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. "You have 48 hours to withdraw Zendaya from St. Jude's and issue a public apology. Or we proceed with custody proceedings. Choose wisely. SV." Zaid's hands shook as he read it again. 48 hours to surrender his daughter's education, her future, her dignity, or lose her forever. Outside, a motorcycle engine rumbled past. Then another. The familiar sound of brothers riding in pairs. And for the first time since walking into that cafeteria, Zaid Flynn knew exactly what he had to do. Chapter 4. Blood and Oil. The clubhouse smelled like whiskey and motor oil. Zaid pushed through the heavy door without knocking, something you never did during church unless the building was on fire or a brother was dying. 12 faces turned toward him, conversation dying mid-sentence. The chapter president, King, sat at the head of the scarred oak table, gray beard touching his chest, eyes hard as flint. "Road captain." King's voice could have stripped paint. "You better be bleeding." "Not me." Zaid pulled off his cut, the sacred vest every angel earned through blood and loyalty, and laid it on the table like an offering. "My daughter." The room went silent. Different kind of silent than the school. This was family. "Speak," King said. Zaid told them everything. The cafeteria, the principal, the cops at his door, the text message giving him 48 hours to choose between his daughter's dignity and losing her forever. He didn't cry, didn't beg, just laid out the facts like mission intel. When he finished, King nodded to switch. The sergeant-at-arms was thin, wiry, covered in circuit board tattoos. He'd done 2 tours in military intelligence before the club saved him from a bottle. His laptop was already open. "Sterling Van de Velde," Switch muttered, fingers flying. "Councilman, District 4, old money, owns 3 shell companies and—" He paused, eyes widening. "Holy shit! What?" Zaid leaned forward. "St. Jude's Academy received a $2 million renovation grant last year. Federal money. But the contractor listed?" Switch spun the laptop. "Doesn't exist. The address is a P.O. box in Metairie. Van de Velde's laundering through the school." The pieces clicked together like a magazine loading. "And your teacher?" Switch pulled up another screen. "Miss Drummond, Jennifer. She owes $43,000 to Harrah's Casino. Debt was bought by—" "Let me guess," Zaid said. "Van de Velde." Switch nodded. She's not protecting the kid because she wants to. She's doing it because she has to. King stood, the chair scraping like a judge's gavel. Every eye turned to him. He'd been president for 20 years, survived 3 wars and a federal RICO case. When King made a decision, it was law. "We could handle this the old way," King said slowly. "Van de Velde's a soft target, lives in Garden District, security's cameras, and a rent-a-cop. We could make him disappear, and no one would ask questions." Several brothers nodded. Zaid felt the pull of it, the simple, brutal justice his knuckles wanted. "But," King continued, "that's what he expects, wants even. Biker trash acting like animals gives him justification, proves he was right to threaten Zaid, right to take his daughter." He looked at Zaid directly. "We're not giving him that satisfaction." "Then what?" Zaid's voice cracked. "I've got 48 hours. We give him something he can't control." King's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Public exposure. These rich bastards fear cameras more than bullets. They can survive violence. They can't survive shame." Switch was already typing. "I can have this laundering evidence to every news station in Louisiana by morning." "No." King shook his head. "That's the follow-up. First, we show them who they're dealing with. We show them that little girl in the red shirt." He pointed at Zaid. "She's got 100 brothers who'll burn this city down before we let her cry alone again." Zaid's throat tightened. "What are you saying?" King picked up his phone, started scrolling through contacts. Chapter presidents from Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Biloxi, Mobile. "I'm saying," King said quietly, "tomorrow morning, when Councilman Van de Velde drives his daughter to school, he's going to see what real power looks like." He hit dial, put it on speaker. "King, that you?" A voice like gravel came through. "What's the emergency? How many bikes can you roll to New Orleans by dawn?" Silence. Then, "For what?" King looked at Zaid. "For a little girl who needs to know she's protected." "All of them," the voice said. "Every single one." King made 4 more calls. Same question. Same answer. When he hung up, he turned to Zaid with something that might have been pride. "Go home, road captain. Kiss your daughter good night. Because tomorrow," he grinned, "tomorrow, we teach St. Jude's Academy what happens when you mess with family." Zaid rode home through the French Quarter, past neon saints and drunk tourists, and for the first time in days, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. But when he pulled into his driveway, he saw it immediately. His front door, wide open, swinging on its hinges, and inside, the lights were all off. Chapter 5. The Trap. Zaid's phone rang at 7:43 a.m., jolting him from the first real sleep he'd had in days. "Mr. Flynn?" The school secretary's voice was clipped, efficient. "This is St. Jude's. Zendaya's feeling ill. You need to come pick her up immediately." He was on his bike before the call ended. The morning air was thick with Louisiana humidity, but Zaid barely felt it. His daughter was sick, alone, in that place where teachers watched kids suffer and did nothing. He pushed the Harley hard, weaving through traffic on Chupitulas, his heart hammering against his ribs. The school parking lot was nearly empty when he arrived. Too empty. Where were the other parents? The staff cars? Wrong. This felt wrong. He found Zendaya in the nurse's office, sitting on the examination table, looking perfectly fine. confused but fine. No fever, no tears. Just a little girl who didn't understand why she'd been pulled from class. "Daddy?" Her voice was small. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby, never." He moved to pick her up. "Mr. Flynn." The voice stopped him cold. Councilman Sterling Van de Velde stood in the doorway, flanked by two men in polo shirts. Off-duty cops trying to look casual but standing like they were ready to draw. Van de Velde was exactly what Zaid expected. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of smile that promised suffering. "I thought we should have a face-to-face conversation," Van de Velde said, stepping inside. "Man to man." Zaid's hands curled into fists. "Get out of my way!" "Your daughter's not actually sick. I'm sure you figured that out. This is what we call leverage. A teaching moment." Van de Velde's smile widened. "You seem to have forgotten your place in this city, Mr. Flynn. Let me remind you." Every muscle in Zaid's body screamed to move, to put this man through the wall. But Zendaya was watching. "Your daughter," Van de Velde continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "doesn't belong at St. Jude's. Just like her mother didn't belong anywhere near a man like you." "What was her name again? Sarah? The nurse who thought she could save a criminal?" Zaid's vision tunneled. His wife's name in this man's mouth felt like desecration. "I heard she begged you to leave the club, begged you to be normal. But you couldn't, could you? And where is she now?" Van de Velde took a step closer. "Dead. Because you brought that life home. Just like you're bringing it here, to my son's school, poisoning it with your—" "Don't." The word came out strangled. Zaid's knuckles had gone white. "With your trash." Van de Velde said it directly to Zendaya now, making sure she heard. "That's what you are, sweetie. Trash. And trash doesn't get to sit with decent children." The two cops stepped forward, hands near their belts, waiting, hoping. This was the trap. Hit him, scream, give them any excuse. Zaid looked at his daughter, 7 years old, trying so hard not to cry, and made a choice that felt like swallowing glass. He knelt, picked up Zendaya, held her close, and walked past Van de Velde without a word. "That's what I thought," the councilman called after him. "You're nothing. A coward in leather pretending to be dangerous. Your daughter will be in state custody by Friday, and there's not a goddamn thing you can—" Zaid kept walking, out the door, across the parking lot, to his bike. He strapped Zendaya into her seat, hands shaking so badly he could barely manage the clips. She wrapped her arms around his waist as they pulled out, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, "why did that man say those things about Mommy?" Zaid didn't answer. Couldn't, because if he opened his mouth, he'd scream. And if he screamed, he'd turn around. And if he turned around, he'd lose her forever. So instead, he rode. Rode until his phone buzzed with a text from King. "Brothers are rolling. Every chapter from Texas to Florida. Tomorrow morning. Be ready." Zaid pulled over on the levee, Mississippi River churning brown below, and finally let himself feel it. The humiliation, the rage, the shame of walking away while that man spit on his wife's memory. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Sterling Van de Velde would learn what happened when you mistook mercy for weakness. When you forgot that the quietest men carry the loudest storms. His phone buzzed again. Different number. A video attachment. Zaid's blood froze when he opened it. Security footage from inside his house. from last night. Someone had been inside. While he was at the clubhouse, while Zendaya was sleeping. The camera showed a figure in dark clothes standing over her bed, just watching. The timestamp, 11:47 p.m., and at the bottom, a message. 48 hours is up in 12. Tick-tock. SV. Chapter 6. The Call to the Highway. Zaid didn't sleep. Instead, he sat on his porch with his phone, watching his daughter sleep through the window while he made calls that would either save her or damn them both. King had promised numbers. Now Zaid needed to make sure those numbers were real. Baton Rouge chapter. This is Reaper. It's Zaid Flynn, New Orleans road captain. King said you were rolling. Dawn, 23 bikes. We'll be there. 1 chapter down. 3 more to go. Lafayette answered on the first ring. 18 bikes. Biloxi took longer. Their president, a man called Tombstone, had questions. This for the club or personal? Both, Zaid said quietly. My daughter, 7 years old. They put their hands on her. Silence. Then, we ride for blood, brother. Always have. But King says no violence. That true? Yeah. Then what's the point? The point, Zaid said, his voice steady as a blade, is that little girl needs to walk into that school tomorrow knowing she's protected, needs to see that her daddy didn't break, that the world can't touch her because she's got family. Another pause. 15 bikes. We'll be there. By 3 a.m., Zaid had confirmations from 5 chapters. 76 motorcycles. 76 brothers who'd never met Zendaya, but would ride 3 hours through Louisiana night because that's what family meant. It still didn't feel like enough. At 6 a.m., dawn broke humid and gold over New Orleans. Zaid made coffee he didn't drink and stood in Zendaya's doorway, watching her sleep in her little bed, clutching the stuffed bear her mother had given her 3 years ago. Today had to work, because there was no tomorrow after this. Baby girl, he said softly, time to wake up. She stirred, rubbed her eyes. Is it school day? Yeah, but today's going to be different. I promise. He helped her dress in her red shirt, the one with the glitter heart, the same one she'd been wearing when Tripp knocked her lunch tray on the floor. She looked at it uncertainly. Daddy, I don't like this shirt anymore. I know, but we're taking it back. Taking back everything they tried to make you scared of. You understand? She nodded, though her eyes said she didn't believe him. They ate breakfast in silence, cereal, orange juice, the morning routine of a single father who was running out of mornings. Then Zaid checked his phone one more time. No new messages from King, no updates, just the security footage still sitting in his texts like a threat. He strapped Zendaya onto his bike, her small helmet bobbing as she settled in behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, trusting him completely, even though every adult in her life had proven that trust was a lie. Hold on tight, baby. The engine roared to life, a sound that usually made Zendaya giggle. Today, she was silent. They rode through the French Quarter as the city woke up. Delivery trucks, street sweepers, tourists stumbling home from bourbon-soaked nights, normal people living normal lives while Zaid's world balanced on a knife edge. The streets were empty as they approached St. Jude's. Too empty. Zaid's stomach dropped. Where were the brothers? King had promised they were coming. 76 bikes, 76 engines loud enough to shake the earth. But the road ahead was quiet. Just humid Louisiana morning and the distant sound of jazz drifting from someone's radio. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe Van de Velde had gotten to them. Maybe Zaid was about to ride up to that school alone, just another broke biker trying to fight a system designed to crush men like him. He slowed as the school gates came into view. Van de Velde's black town car was already there, idling in the drop-off lane like a promise. The councilman stood beside it, arms crossed, flanked by 4 men who looked like they knew how to hurt people quietly. Waiting. Zaid's hand tightened on the throttle. Zendaya's grip tightened around his waist. This was it. The moment he either proved he could protect his daughter or lost her forever. He was 50 yards from the gates when he heard it. Faint at first, distant, like thunder rolling in from the Gulf, then louder. The low mechanical rumble of dozens, no, hundreds of engines, coming from every direction at once. Zaid's heart hammered as he looked in his mirrors and saw the cavalry arriving. Not 76 bikes. Every single chapter in the South. The street behind him filled with chrome and leather and American flags, a tsunami of motorcycles rolling in formation, blocking traffic, shaking windows, announcing their presence like the wrath of God made mechanical. Zaid looked down at Zendaya. "Remember what I said, baby? Today's different." She looked up, saw the wall of bikers behind them, and for the first time in days, she smiled. Van de Velde's face went white, because he'd just realized he'd brought cops to a war, and the angels had brought an army. Chapter 7. Thunder on the Avenue. The Spanish moss trembled first, then the windows, then the ground itself. The rumble started low, felt more than heard, a mechanical earthquake rolling through the Garden District like Judgment Day on 2 wheels. Van de Velde's confident smirk cracked as he turned toward the sound, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. Too late. From Britannia Street, the first wave appeared. 20 bikes, riding 2 abreast, engines synchronized in a roar that drowned out thought itself. Baton Rouge. Chapter. Their cuts identifying them clearly, skull and wings and the words that made politicians nervous. Hell's Angels Motorcycle Club. They didn't speed, didn't rev aggressively, just rolled in at exactly 25 miles per hour, legal and deliberate, pulling to a stop along the curb opposite Van de Velde's town car. Engines off, kickstands down in perfect unison, clack, 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 like a firing squad loading. Then they just stood there, arms crossed, silent, watching. Before Van de Velde could process it, the second wave hit from Magazine Street. Lafayette chapter. 18 bikes, same formation, same eerie discipline. They lined up behind Baton Rouge, creating a wall of chrome and leather that stretched half a block. Parents dropping off their kids froze mid-step. A Mercedes SUV stopped dead in the street, the driver's mouth hanging open. "What the hell?" One of Van de Velde's cops started. The third wave came from Chupatulas. Biloxi chapter. 15 bikes. They split formation, half lining the right side of the street, half the left, creating a corridor, a tunnel, leading directly to the school entrance, where Zaid sat on his bike, daughter behind him, waiting. The fourth wave, the fifth, Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida. Chapters Zaid had never even met, rolling in from dawn rides across state lines because King had made a call, and blood answered. 143 motorcycles, 143 men in cuts bearing the same patches, the same loyalty, the same message. You touched one of ours. They lined both sides of the avenue leading to St. Jude's Academy, transforming a pristine private school street into something that looked like a military procession. American flags mounted on sissy bars snapped in the humid breeze. Chrome gleamed under morning sun. Not a single bike blocked a driveway. Not a single law was broken. But the message was unmistakable. Vandeveld's town car was boxed in completely. Bikes in front, behind, both sides. He couldn't move without asking permission from men who would never give it. Teachers appeared at school windows, faces pale. The principal, Herbert, stood at the front entrance, phone pressed to his ear, calling someone who wouldn't help him. Miss Drummond stood behind him, one hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Parents in the drop-off line sat frozen in their luxury cars, suddenly understanding they'd stumbled into something far beyond their tax bracket's ability to control. One woman tried to reverse, but bikes had materialized behind her too. No one was leaving. No one was entering. Not until Zaid Flynn's daughter walked through that door. King appeared then, rolling his bike slowly to the front, stopping beside Zaid. The chapter president was in his 60s, gray beard down to his chest, eyes that had seen men die and countries burn. He shut off his engine. The silence that followed was deafening. 143 bikers, standing, waiting, not threatening, not advancing, just present. Vandeveld found his voice first, stepping forward, trying to reclaim authority. This is illegal assembly. This is intimidation. I'm calling. Calling who? King's voice cut through the humid air like a blade. We're parked legally, obeying all traffic laws, exercising our constitutional right to peacefully assemble. He smiled, not friendly. What law exactly are we breaking, Councilman? Vandeveld's jaw worked. His cops looked uncertain now, hands near their weapons but not touching them because every move was being filmed by a dozen bystanders with phones out. You don't scare me, Vandeveld said, but his voice shook. We're not here to scare you. King turned to Zaid, nodded once. We're here to walk a little girl to school. Zaid shut off his bike, helped Zendaya down. She stood beside him in her red shirt, small hand gripping his finger, looking up at the wall of bikers with wide eyes. It's okay, baby, Zaid whispered. They're family. King dismounted, walked to Zendaya, knelt down to her level. This massive, terrifying man with prison tattoos and scars, and his voice went soft. Hey there, sweetheart. My name's King. These are your uncles. Every single one of them rode here this morning just for you. He held out his hand. How about we walk you to class? Zendaya looked at her father. Zaid nodded. She took King's hand, and then something happened that would be remembered in New Orleans for years. 143 Hells Angels dismounted their bikes in perfect unison. They formed two lines, a human corridor from Zaid's bike to the school, to entrance. And as Zendaya walked between them, tiny in her red shirt, they did something no one expected. They knelt. Chapter 8. The Walk of Kings. Every single one of them. 143 Hells Angels, Men with prison records and purple hearts, men who'd buried brothers and broken bones, men the world called dangerous, dropped to one knee as a 7-year-old girl walked past, not in mockery, not for show, in respect. Zendaya's grip on King's hand tightened as she took her first step into the human corridor. Her eyes were wide, darting between the rows of kneeling bikers, trying to understand what was happening. Then the first one spoke. "Morning, Princess." A massive biker from Baton Rouge, beard down to his chest, held out his fist for a bump. Zendaya hesitated, looked up at King. He nodded. She bumped it, and the biker's face split into a grin. "You're tougher than you know, kid." 2 steps later, another biker, Lafayette Patch, tattoos covering every inch of visible skin, pulled a sticker from his cut. Cartoon angel with a motorcycle. "For your backpack, so everyone knows you're protected." She took it with trembling fingers. Another step. Another biker. This one from Mobile, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. He handed her a small stuffed bear wearing a tiny leather vest. "My daughter's. She wanted you to have it." Zendaya's eyes filled with tears. But for the first time, they weren't from pain. Halfway down the corridor, a biker from Pensacola stood up and removed something from his bike. A custom leather vest, child-sized, brand new. The back was embroidered in gold thread. "Property of Daddy. Protected by Hell's Angels, Mech." He draped it over her shoulders like a coronation. It swallowed her small frame, hung down to her knees, but she wore it like armor, and she smiled. For the first time since this nightmare began, Zendaya Flynn smiled. The cameras caught it all. Every parent with a phone recorded the moment. The image would go viral within hours. A tiny girl in a red shirt and oversized biker vest walking through a tunnel of kneeling outlaws while a corrupt politician watched his power evaporate in real time. Van de Velde was screaming now, phone pressed to his ear, face purple with rage. "I don't care what it looks like. Get them out of here. Arrest them. Do something." But no one moved. His cops stood frozen, hands away from their weapons, knowing this wasn't a fight they could win. Not with this many cameras, not with this many witnesses. Inside the school, Miss Drummond watched from the window. She'd stood by yesterday, watched Zendaya cry on the floor, allowed it because she was scared, because Van de Velde owned her debt, because she'd made peace with being a coward. But watching this, watching these criminals show more courage than she'd had in years, something broke inside her. Or maybe something healed. She moved without thinking, pushed past Principal Herbert, who was still on his phone trying to save his job, walked out the front entrance into the humid morning air where an army of bikers stood guard over one little girl. "Miss Drummond," Van de Velde barked, "get back inside. This is—" She ignored him completely, walked straight to Zendaya, knelt down. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you." Tears streamed down her face. "But that's over now. I promise." She took Zendaya's hand, the other hand still held by King, and the 3 of them walked toward the school entrance together. The bikers parted like an honor guard. Van de Velde tried to block the door. "She's not going in there. I'll have this entire school shut down. You'll do nothing." Miss Drummond's voice was steel now. "You're done. And if you try to touch this child again, I'll testify to everything. The laundering, the blackmail, all of it." Vandeveld's face went from purple to white. King stepped forward, putting himself between the councilman and the door. "She's going to class now. You got a problem with that? Take it up with the 100+ witnesses currently filming everything you say." For the first time in Sterling Vandeveld's privileged life, he had no move, no leverage, no power, just cameras and witnesses and a reckoning he couldn't buy his way out of. Miss Drummond led Zendaya through the door. The little girl looked back once at her father. Zaid nodded. "You're safe now, baby. Go." She disappeared inside. The door closed. And then, silence. 143 bikers stood, returned to their bikes, started engines in a synchronized roar that shook the oak trees and rattled every window on the block. But they didn't leave. They stayed parked, watching, waiting for school to end, making it clear, this isn't one day, this is every day, until she's safe. Vandevelde's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went gray. "What?" Zaid stepped closer, reading the man's expression. "What happened?" Vandeveld lowered the phone slowly. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "The news. They have documents, financial records, the school renovation fund. They're asking me to comment on..." Switch, King's tech guy. He'd leaked it all, the evidence, the money laundering, everything. Vandeveld looked at Zaid with something close to horror. "You've destroyed me." "No," Zaid said quietly. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it." News vans were already appearing at the end of the block, attracted by the spectacle of over 100 motorcycles surrounding a private school. This was about to become the story of the year. And Zaid realized with sudden cold clarity, Vandeveld wasn't going to take this lying down. Men like him never did. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. "Your daughter's safe at school. For now. But you? You just declared war on a man with nothing left to lose. Watch your back, Flynn. SV." 3 weeks later, the news was still running the story. Councilman Vandeveld resigns amid corruption probe. The financial documents Switch had compiled, 2 years of falsified invoices, shell companies, laundered renovation funds, had landed on every major news desk in Louisiana within hours of the school standoff. Federal investigators opened a case the next day. By the end of the week, Sterling Vandeveld had resigned his position to focus on his legal defense. Translation: he was finished. Trip Vandeveld, the 12-year-old bully who'd started this nightmare by knocking over a lunch tray, was quietly transferred to a boarding school in Connecticut, far away from the cameras, far away from the little girl whose father had an army. Miss Drummond kept her job at St. Jude's, but she was different now. She'd created a new anti-bullying program, one that actually worked, and spent her lunch period sitting with kids who ate alone, making sure no one ever sat on a cafeteria floor crying while she looked away. Redemption looked like small daily choices. She was making them. As for Zaid, he showed up every morning at school drop-off, and every morning at least a dozen brothers from the New Orleans chapter showed up with him. Not 100, just enough to remind everyone that Zendaya Flynn was never going to be unprotected again. Today was different, though. Today was special. Zaid picked Zendaya up early from school, signed her out with a smile from the secretary, who used to look at him like trash. Now she waved at him like he was a hero. Funny how perception changed when you refused to back down. They rode through the French Quarter, past Jackson Square where street musicians played and tourists posed for photos. The afternoon was warm, humid, the Mississippi River flowing brown and eternal beside them. Zaid pulled off onto the levee overlook, the same spot where he'd read Van de Velde's threat 3 weeks ago, and cut the engine. Zendaya hopped off, still wearing the vest the Pensacola chapter had given her. She wore it everywhere now, even slept in it sometimes. "Daddy, why'd we stop?" Zaid reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small package wrapped in leather. "Because today's the day you become official." Her eyes went wide. "Official what?" "Official family." He unwrapped the package, revealing a patch, custom made. It showed a small angel with a glitter heart on her shirt, standing between 2 motorcycles. At the top, embroidered in gold, Zendaya Glitter Flynn. At the bottom, protected by AMC. A road name. Her road name. "The brothers voted," Zaid said quietly, kneeling to her level. "You're not just my daughter anymore. You're the chapter's little sister. That means you've got 100+ uncles who'll ride through hell to keep you safe. Understand?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears this time. Zaid sewed the patch onto her vest right there on the levee, his scarred hands moving carefully, making sure every stitch was perfect. When he finished, he stood back and looked at his daughter. "How do you feel, Glitter?" She looked down at her vest, touched the patch with small fingers and smiled. That same smile she'd given him when the bikers knelt for her. "I feel safe, Daddy." 3 words. That's all it took to make everything worth it. They rode home along River Road as the sun set over the Mississippi, turning the water gold and the sky purple. Zendaya's arms wrapped tight around her father's waist, her small custom vest flapping in the wind, her road name glittering in the fading light. The girl who'd been crying on a cafeteria floor, alone and broken, now rode on the back of a Harley with an army at her back. Because that's what Brotherhood meant. Not leather and engines and violence, but standing in the gap for those who couldn't stand for themselves. Being the family that blood never gave them. And protecting the innocent with everything you had, even when the world called you trash for doing it. As they pulled into their driveway, King's voice echoed in Zaid's memory from that morning at the clubhouse. "Blood makes you related, brother, but loyalty makes you family." Zaid looked at his daughter, his glitter, and smiled. She was home, and she always would be. If you believe that no child should ever have to eat off a dirty floor while adults watch, and that sometimes real heroes wear leather vests instead of capes, like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories like this. Also, check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.